Graham Whiteside from Anatomic Excellence. Welcome to the Anatomy-Clay Learning System podcast.
Good morning, Mark. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me as well. And it took a few weeks to set this up. We so appreciate your providing the time to do this. So you are involved in and have been involved in a fascinating world for how long now?
In anatomy directly since 2015, but in medical education 2006 in terms of medical sales and such, but also all my life actually as a child. I've been involved in sort of understanding what's happening in medicine and nursing for some time.
So you can trace your interest in this whole field back to childhood.
Absolutely. My father was actually a state registered nurse in the Royal Army Medical Corps. Had a very interesting career, and as I grew up, I was witness to the 8mm cine films that he would play to rehearse prior to presenting to paratroopers and other soldiers, where he would have footage of the field hospitals in various conflict zones. Whilst I was eating things like chopped liver and onions and just, watching it, and it sort of gave a fascination. I also assisted him in setting up a charity at one point with Behçet syndrome in the UK, because a friend of his had that condition. And that really gave me an interest in the caring professions. There was a consideration for medical school at one point, but and I want this to come across the right way, I wanted to provide physical cares for my patients. I enjoyed actually helping someone one-on-one. And so nursing was my area. And that led to me becoming a general nurse in 87 when I started. Eventually became an ICU nurse. And then at some point in the mid-90s, I changed direction and became a registered mental nurse, which is a psychiatric nurse in England. And from all of that, gained my interest in education. And that really was the bit that sort of, as I came into sales, I kept gravitating towards the educational roles or the educational element of the sales, resulting in 2006 in a role in a medical simulation company. And they were who sent me to America, gave me the opportunity here, and then everything else evolved thereafter.
Yeah. Wow. It just sounds like a very focused and singular passion, drive, interest. Just sounds like this has been a through line for you since childhood.
I think in a way, yes. I would say it was more opportunistic at times, actually. I'm the sort of person who will, a friend of mine, for instance, was going to, leaving where we were both working, going to a mental health training course in Manchester in England, which I'd been looking for, but hadn't found. And I rang the school on the Wednesday and said, hey, are there any spare places coming up? When's your next course? And I said, it's a shame you have no spare places now. I'd turn up. On the Monday, the guy didn't arrive due to sickness and being very unwell and couldn't start the course. So on the Tuesday, they rang me, said, can you come and get an interview tomorrow? I interviewed the next day, and the following Monday, I started my psychiatric nursing course. And that's not dissimilar to sort of my path at various times. I see something that interests me, I pursue it. So it's weaved a little bit. I actually originally started out in the banking industry and swore off spreadsheets and the desire to actually stare at numbers, which is now kind of what I do, part of my daily work.
Yeah, right. Wow. Can you talk a little bit about, or I don't know if you want to go into the medical simulation company you were with prior to Anatomic Excellence?
Yeah, I was with a company called Limbs and Things primarily during that part of my career, and was a salesman for them in the north of England. We found between us that my exposure in the past and my sort of understanding of the sort of the clinical need for certain of the training products was really beneficial. And I started to find my passion for having something in my hands and being able to demonstrate it. They gave me softwares on occasion and I was able to navigate them, but I was never as passionate for anything software based. And in coming to America, I I just, I'm a bachelor's trained nurse. I have no MBA. I have no, as such, formal business training, no qualifications, although I've done some project management courses. And I suddenly found a true enjoyment of helping to influence people in providing them with the very best choices they have for education, knowing that we're one of many choices. And it was that work primarily with limbs and things that really gave me the real push to say, I want to make a difference. It did enable me. I mean, through them, I've lobbied on Capitol Hill for money for medical education, which for a working class military boy from England to find yourselves in the corridors of power on Capitol Hill was quite intimidating and interesting, to say the least. And then from that, even contributing to some textbooks on the role of industry as a stakeholder in the education field and in patient safety. Which again surprises me because, I consider myself more of a practical day-to-day guy, but to actually the people I've met, I admire their brains. I get a lot of brain envy when I'm working. I get to meet some of the brightest and the best and the most forward-thinking people in medical and nursing education and allied healthcare education. And, that they give me time to be passionate about what I do and to share my passion has felt very rewarding. I feel honored to be classed by some not only as a trusted advisor and supporter of their work, but also as a friend in some cases. And it's really changed my worldview about what you're capable of, no matter where you're from.
What do you mean by that? That's an interesting statement.
I think for me, I sort of I was a practical nurse. I liked caring for people. I don't class myself as particularly bright, myself. I think our self-analysis skills are always quite, no matter how much we reflect, I think we always tend to sort of tamp down what we believe we are as people. But the engagement I find and the level of conversation I find when I'm talking to the people who share their knowledge with me so readily, they're not worried about holding on to what they know. They share it and they elevate you. I think John Zahorik himself is one of those things. He's an extremely bright and passionate man, but he is so willing to give and share that information to others that helps you understand, where he came from and why. And it's interesting because the more I read in business, and I'm an avid I try to learn things, the Simon Sinek concept of start with why. John's why is very powerful. My why, I hope, is as equally powerful. And for me, it is, regardless of what others think. I know why I do this. I actually care about the future physicians, the future nurses, the future PAs, respiratory therapists, dentists, etc. I'm going to need them soon, very soon, unfortunately. Not intending, but I know I'm going to need them soon. I want them to be the very best they can be. I have that sort of mindset but I also know I'm just a very small cog in a very large machine, and I'm very happy being that. The ability to influence in my role, I think, supersedes what I could ever achieve as a nurse at the bedside. I'm able to sort of put things in front of people that can influence thousands of future practitioners, rather than just a patient. Not that I have any issue with influencing one person at a time in their healthcare journey.
All right, very good. That's excellent. So talk a little bit about just how you got into the world of anatomic excellence and plastination. What prompted that transition?
I was exhibiting with limbs and things at the Ottawa Medical Education Conference in Ottawa, Canada in 2014. And I'm setting up, and I noticed the booth next to me has these preserved body parts, and I start looking at them, and it reminds me of Body Worlds, which I had remembered many years ago and seen. And then it led me to recall that in early 2000s, Dr. Gunther von Hagens had actually done a televised dissection. And he had talked about his process, and even down to how they slice human tissue in blocks of foam and things like this. And while I'm looking at the boxes, which are still there, but they're labeled, I'm sort of looking at them and I'm like, in walks Dr. von Hagens with his son Rurik and one of their team members, Katrine. And it was like a rock star had walked in some respects, because of the way other people reacted. And when your neighbors at an exhibition, as your team know, you chit chat when it's quiet, you get to know each other, you become friends. You know, I've now known John since 2015. You know, it's hard to think it was only 8 years ago, considering all the changes for everybody. And during the exhibit, I casually sort of asked, you know, who's the dealer, or who do you work with in the USA and Canada? And they said, no one. We can't find anyone. And my immediate response was, well, I'll do it. And they were very surprised. They're like, but you already own a company. I was like, oh no, I don't own this. I'm just an employee. But yes, I have a job, but I don't know, maybe the company would be interested in bringing them in, or maybe if not, you know, if there's not much work involved, maybe we could talk about me doing it as a side thing. And that led to our first agreement in 2015, where I started as a part-time agent. And eventually, through various iterations of that relationship in 2017, I realized that there was enough here for me to start a business. And so through discussions with Rurik von Hagens, who's Gunther's son, I established Anatomic Excellence. And on the 1st of January 2018, the company was born, as far as anyone else is concerned. And we've just progressed since there.
That's great. Well, another example of opportunity coming your way, just having the booth assignment at a conference, being right next to somebody else. It could have been across the hall and your life might have taken a different course.
Exactly. I may never have met them, because, you know, when we were always busy, but they were always busy too. And the two of us together, you know, we had, it was medical simulation and training. So I had simulated body parts that you could practice urinary catheterization, IV insertion, laparoscopic surgery, birthing simulators, all of which I would take to customers during development stages. And as someone who could speak the healthcare language in the team, I would take them and I would help sort of feedback to the developers. And then obviously we would promote and sell them. So having that next to real anatomy, I instantly saw the role of both, and how they could complement each other. And it sort of, I realized they were very, very distinct. But what's really interesting now is some of my customers, they actually house their specimens in or near the simulation lab, or because they're non-toxic, easily transported, and don't need special storage, they will take them from their anatomy lab into the sim lab and have them next to the thing that they're training. So there is still to this day a movement towards them both being used. So my appreciation, I think, of both environments, again, kind of helps me to sort of draw that out for the customers as an opportunity.
Right. Very good. Wow. So you mentioned body worlds, and I think a lot of people who might come across this conversation would be familiar with body worlds. And I saw an exhibit at the Denver museum, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years ago. And it was quite the sensation and quite the exhibit. We're talking about the same technology, correct?
That's correct, yes. The whole thing itself stems from some work. Gunther was a young man who came from East Germany, and actually was, after trying to escape East Germany, was imprisoned, and he was bought out of prison by the West German government for, I think, 40,000 marks or dollars, I can't remember which, and went to Heidelberg, to the University Medical School. And after realizing he didn't want to practice medicine in that way, and that he was enamored with and interested in teaching, and specifically anatomy, he had, the story I've always heard is, a heart and other tissues in blocks of plexiglass. And he was always like, why can't we hold the heart? Why can't I put the plexiglass inside the cells of the specimen and stabilize it from within, rather than either this block or something that's wet and toxic, as in formalin fixation? And that led him to experiment. And it was within a very short period of time that he realized he could do this. It took him a while to get it right. His initial experiments with the plexiglass worked, but there were too many air bubbles, the tissue shrank and went dark. Then he was like, well, if I use acetone, a vacuum, and liquid silicone, I might have a better outcome. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. So everything you see today was in some respects a pretty rapid fire process. But within a few years, in 1977, he made his first German patent, in 1980, actually American ones as well. And that led him to promoting plastination as a preservation technique for use within schools. And being the generous person he is, he shared the technique worldwide, having protected it, shared it. They started the International Society for Plastination back in 1982 at a San Antonio-based conference, funnily enough. And then eventually, slowly, they started to realize there was more opportunity. And the Body Worlds thing came about because the Japanese Society for Anatomical Society were having their 100th anniversary, and they invited Gunther to put on a small display. That small display attracted 450,000 people over a 4-month period. They were queuing round the block for hours. And then the fascination level was so high that it led Gunther to the realization that the general public had been starved of understanding their own body and needed education and for their own health and well-being. And that is essentially what led to the development of Body Worlds. It's now classed as the world's most visited traveling exhibit, with over 50 million visitors worldwide over the years. And it has, there are, I think, 11 different themes traveling the world at any one time, including 2 animal exhibits, but 9 human. And they always have a theme on something like, one is on happiness, the chemical basis of happiness, et cetera, et cetera. They've got one called RX on prescriptions, you know, and they have one at the moment, which I believe is on the cardiac cycle. So it's always seeking to educate the public on their body, how it works, and why you should look after it.
Yeah. What you can't think of a better message in many ways than that one to put out about just who we are as people, as creatures. And because it's just, I mean, and that's an idea that anytime you're around John Zohoric, you'll pick that up right away. We need to understand ourselves to know who we are and how our body functions, and recognize where we came from as well. Yeah, that's
absolutely
great.
And I think we've got to a point where there's so much misinformation about how our bodies work, so much, you know, a sort of a narrowed teaching opportunity in sort of our initial education in elementary, middle, and high school in America, and, you know, a narrowing of understanding, and also a lot of disinformation and misinformation about what's healthy nutrition, healthy exercise, a lot of get fit, get healthy quick stuff that's not really based in good evidence-based research. So-called plastic foods, you know, that are in the supermarkets that your body really doesn't know how to handle. So why not use the real food in the right combination? You know, but, you know, from educating people, we can do so much. I take the specimens as a favor. I have agreements with certain local schools. I go into the 7th grade classes for a whole day. Every 7th grade class comes to see the specimens. We show the digestive system, circulatory, respiratory system, various muscles, bones, head, neck, nervous system. And we talk about understanding themselves first, but also the value of understanding the human body in relation to future career opportunities. Everything from sequential art and how to make a superhero look dynamic by understanding the origin and insertion of muscle attachments. Again, something close to John in particular. but NASA scientists developing the systems for the astronauts to have their own personalized seat for load bearing and bathroom technique, through to careers in healthcare, in biology, in genetics, and all these different places where understanding the human body can, and fitness, etc. And for some people who, in some of the more disadvantaged areas where I've had the honor of going, we've talked about how sport is an avenue for them, and how being the healthiest person who knows their body the best in the team will give them a longer career and increase their potential, success in that career and potentially their earnings. And, whatever we talk about, I see eyes light up in the classroom. And again, I'm not an educator, but I love sharing knowledge. I don't have the presence. I don't have the presence or the calm and the patience to be a true educator. That's a skill set I do not have. And I really admire everybody in the education field for that.
Boy, they're true heroes, and their dedication and their talent at bringing a whole classroom along year after year. Just and they're undervalued in my opinion as well in terms of how much we pay them.
Oh, but, absolutely.
So Anatomic Excellence takes this technology, this this product, and you sell to schools and you sell to universities. You also sell to hospitals, correct?
So I'm classed as an agent.
Okay.
For want of a better word, a middleman. Von Hagens, for various reasons, did not want to set up directly here in the USA. It's still a very, worldwide known, very successful, but still a small niche business with very, very, very high costs, because skilled dissection in European community with strict laws, strict ethical requirements and management and requirements isn't cheap. So we and they are very careful to make sure that we do this the right way, ethically and legally. So as an agent, what I do is I work as an extension of their company. I promote the specimens, I take them to exhibitions, I talk directly to the schools on their behalf, and I facilitate all of the purchases. But the purchases are actually made directly from Germany, and then the ethical ownership or the sort of follow through of the specimens goes from the Institute for Plastination through to the preparation facility, Gubina Plastinata, directly to the end user. So I'm not in the middle putting anything in there for profit. I'm actually working at a very different way to most companies in this type of arena. I'm not a reseller. I'm not a distributor. I'm just an agent. But obviously, I have to have the reach as if I was any other type of commercial interest. But I get to talk to the medical schools, the deans, the chairs of the departments, the technicians, the body donation programs on occasion, and help them understand what these specimens are and what they can do, how they're prepared, how that means they can be stored, etc. And I've even actually spoke to architectural companies and presented to architects who design schools and school buildings and help them understand how different this is to a lab that needs, all of with the wet dissection, where they have the toxicity concerns, the downdraft ventilation, the refrigeration and freezers, the need for eye wash stations and stuff that don't actually exist with plastinets in the classroom.
Right. Yeah, that's also one of the kind of suggestions we have with Anatomy and Clay, that building with your hands with clay doesn't require, obviously, some of the chemicals that go with, formaldehyde and things like that go with other dissection opportunities and, et cetera. So, yeah. So give us an idea of how much sort of penetration you have. Do you have a rough idea of how many K-12 schools and medical schools and or hospitals have engaged?
So For a small outfit, I think we're doing fairly well, but we are barely scratching the surface. We don't, the K-12 schools don't really have a budget.
Yeah.
I mentioned the cost of running a program to even develop these. We do have schools interested, and we have sold the odd piece to educators in that field. Most often not human tissue based, but stuff that comes from our work with the human tissue, such as blood vessel configurations and anatomy class. In the medical school area, I have definite input to around 40 to 50 of the 200 plus MD and DO schools. It's interesting with that type of client that the specimen collection that they have acquired through Von Hagen's may be something that fixes a specific problem in the way they teach. For instance, pelvis perineum, head, neck, and neuro, the dissection of that to the level of detail that we can get to is beyond the time constraints, and where the students are doing their dissections, often the skill level of the people doing the dissections. So we fix those problems for them with 1 or 2 specimens, just to give them something like the 12. Oh, my mind would go blank at that point. The 12 cranial nerves, something like that, or to actually help them understand, the intricacies of the pelvis and perineum. And from there, they usually go on, once they see the value, to start acquiring pieces every year. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is always fun, is working with a brand new medical school. And so in America, you have a number of DO schools that are opening, more new DO schools than the new MD schools. When they're opening, that's when I get the chance to talk to the architects. I get to talk to the founding deans, and even sometimes the benefactors, and from there, we'll literally look from ground zero to, okay, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, when the building opens, and you take your first student, what are you going to have in front of them? And we look at the curriculum, we analyze the needs, we recommend specimens through our anatomists in our team back in Germany. We recommend a specific collection. We make bespoke specimens for it on occasion. That's really fun, because they may or may not include dissection in their program. We don't recommend doing away with dissection. That's one thing I want to there is a purpose to dissection, there is a value. It is an amazing technique for teaching if you have the time to do it and the resources within your environment.
Right.
But what we're seeing is a compression of the basic sciences in medical and healthcare education. It's not all bad. Part of it, and an anatomist I spoke to recently said, immunology was a small part of my education. Now it's a huge area of study. Genetics has come forward. Transplant has become something. So all these things that are new and sort of growing parts of the healthcare sciences need to be taught. So what they're finding, I think, is the basic sciences are being compressed. So you no longer have time to dissect a whole body over a whole year.
Right.
Plus teaching techniques is changing. So they're doing problem-based learning, case-based learning. And a whole body dissected over sometimes a 2-3 year period would not be very successful. So again, it lends itself, those compressed time zones lend itself to fascination being a very good answer, because it's real human tissue with all the intricacies of human tissue. And I think the customers find it as the next best thing.
Yeah.
Obviously there are other technologies. I think ANATOMYINCLAY, obviously, some of the VR and AR based stuff. But if you want real human tissue, fascination is really, it's the easiest almost option outside of a dissection based course.
Yeah. couple of things. One is you mentioned a phrase, and I forgive my ignorance. What is a bespoke specimen? What is that?
So we have our own body donation program. In fact, as far as we're aware, we're the only company that has a dedicated body donation program for this specific purpose. So we're very
Gotcha.
ethically sound. So when we speak with our clients and they start asking us what they tell us what they want, I usually pause and step back and say, well, can you explain to me what you're going to do? Who's your intended audience? What is it you're trying to achieve? What's the aims of your curriculum? What's the outcome you're hoping for? Do you have a list of structures you definitely want to show? And we have a standard brochure. It's over 150 pages deep. Actually, we have two. We have I had a neuro one that was just launched recently. That's, good 60 pages itself. And when we get talking, we'd say, well, there's 3 specimens here you could work with. But actually, based on the level of students you're teaching, based on, the time you say you're available and the resources you've got, we could almost merge these 2 specimens into one. The other way it happens is, and so, as I hate to use the term, as our donors, our raw material is the human body. As long as it's practically reasonable, we can dissect it, preserve it, and present it in almost any way that someone asks. Interestingly, there have been a few exceptions to this. We had a request from one medical school to show the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries and everything they supply and the whole arrangement. And they gave us a wonderful drawing from one of the best atlases out there. The immediate response from our dissection team was, you can't do this in reality. This is an idealized drawing. There are dotted lines representing the fact that this is hidden behind something else in reality. And we ended up creating 3 specimens for them rather than the one, because it was practically the only way to show the level of detail they needed. And that specimen became a standard offering in our modern brochure.
Right. Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to kind of raise around the shrinking time for dissection in medical schools. If I say the term shortcut, that sounds like a pejorative, like something negative. But really, with plastination, if folks haven't seen it, I mean, the quick access to a level of detail is really off the charts. And I was going to ask, for the folks you meet for the first time and show them what this is, and maybe Body Worlds has already introduced it as a general concept to the average person out there, I don't know, but there is just got to be an eye-opening moment where they realize what information is so readily available by observing an exhibit.
Absolutely, yeah. The one for me is when they talk about, we enjoy our dissections, we get great stuff out of them, but we have obvious issues, not just with time, but the supply of quality donors is actually quite poor in some areas of the world and in the country. There are restrictions. If you want to run a standardized program, nobody can be over 6 foot tall. No one can be over a certain BMI, obesity, no crushed injuries. There's all these different criteria that must be met. So you offer the students a standardized opportunity for learning and teaching. Then there's the time taken to do it. So if I was to show you the route of the nerves from spine through the brachial plexus down to the tips of the fingers, which I know is actually also a specimen in your offering at ANATOMYINCLAY, because I did that class myself.
Mm-hmm.
The dissection of that would take hours.
Yeah.
A skilled dissector would take quite some time, but the student's going to take hours. Then you find that they cut the nerve, the vessel, or whatever they're looking for, which is obviously tissue under tension. And the minute they cut it, it disappears up into the muscles or either side of where it was cut. So they don't have the structure they're supposed to be looking at. Whereas on ours, I can literally stand next to it and go, spine, brachial plexus, wraps round, goes down the arm, splits here, goes there, etc. Notice the lack of terminology, by the way. I've never said I was an anatomist. I'm an anatomy enthusiast, providing good quality specimens. But you know, that ability to show that and then sort of relate that to the different parts of the nervous system, you know, how it operates on the muscles for the, you know, and then, you know, relates to the flexor and extensor tendons and the different things. That's in minutes. It's such an efficient way to teach. And I think this goes back to what is the aim of anatomy education? And this is a debate I hear a lot. The aim of anatomy education is to teach anatomy. It's not to create surgeons. Many people in medical education do not become surgeons, but they still need to know anatomy. So there's this understandable discussion about the value. I do believe dissection has a value. It's cutting someone deliberately in a dissection isn't something everybody can do. And if someone's dreamed of being a surgeon all their life and they go to make that first cut and they find they haven't, it's beyond them. Because we're not, you know, as a species, it's against our instincts. You know, you have to have a certain level of cold clinical reasoning and ability to do that. And it changes people's career path. Suddenly they're interested in an aspect of medicine that doesn't involve knives. So I think there's a massive value to the what is often called the first patient in dissection. But if the aim is to teach someone anatomy, there is a huge efficiency, cost effectiveness in a plastination. Plus, the main methods of preservation are well known to be toxic. They require a huge amount of specialist equipment, downdraft ventilation, expensive tables, refrigeration, the running of the body donation program. Once you add that up and the continued on costs of all that, it's massively expensive. And it's actually more cost effective to buy a plastinate that's going to last, if you look after it, almost forever. We in fact have no idea when a plastinate will finally stop being useful if you look after it. Even the initial ones Gunther created 40 years ago, 50, are just still in good condition. They're recognizable, you know, for what they are. You could still use them to teach.
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating rundown, Graham. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up? I just have to say, I think as you go around to schools and talk to folks, I have a hunch that you kind of see your own self, your youthful self in those classrooms, and you imagine the interest and intrigue that you had, and you see those eyes of kids in classrooms lighting up, and it must feel really good to bring something that is so helpful to the learning environment.
In a way, yeah. In a way, yes. In a way, no. I see people that I see the passion, and I love to see someone, whatever their career is, being passionate about what they do, and then to see light bulb moments, and to see the light bulb moments not just in them, but to actually see the skill of the educators in taking what is really a tool. And I don't want to demean the specimens or any other tool that anyone provides. It's a tool, but any tool in the hands of an uneducated, unimaginative individual is just a tool. And when you have a tool, you know, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. No, it's a tool that's fit for a certain purpose. So to see the way actually that the educators use it, to see them have light bulb moments, as you say, at the booth, when I say this is for this, and they go, yes, that's fantastic, I love that. But look here at the temporal fossa. Oh my goodness, I have never seen a dissection like that. Oh my goodness, I could have done with this 4 weeks ago. When can I get one? You know, that enthusiasm from the users who know what they can do is really what drives me now and carries me forward with enthusiasm. And I try as hard as I can to get into as many labs as I possibly can. But in doing that, it's because I want to learn how they're used in practice, not just in theory. And sometimes they use them in ways we would never have thought of. One of our customers has actually scanned them during COVID and embedded them in their learning management system and is using them to teach remotely. Now, they wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for COVID. So COVID led to inspirational adaptations in the education field. And I think that actually is also something that's supporting the sort of increasing role of plastinates to some of our customers.
Wow, that's great. So if somebody was watching this and wanted to reach out to you, should they just come to the website, or is there a specific way to contact you you'd like to pass along?
Absolutely. They can reach out to me directly at Graham@anatomicexcellence.com, at GRAHAM @anatomicexcellence.com, or they can look at the website, anatomicexcellence.com, or there's von Hagen's plastination.com directly with the German team. Whatever comes through there, they can learn a lot. And there's a website for the Body Worlds exhibition as well. There's a wealth of information. There's a wealth of evidence about its use as well out there in the literature, and I'd encourage the educators to do that research to find out, its perceived use and value. And if they want to see me, I'm at usual anatomic exhibitions throughout the year, the AAA, HAPS, AACA. And actually this week, the other way that they get to contact, I'm starting a new side to the business where I'm working with a very well-respected dissector, Laurie Nemitz. And we're actually starting our own dissection classes for anybody in the sports athletic training world, what I would see as non-traditional anatomists. So there's other ways of getting to us, and that can be done through, contact me through email. I'd love to help.
Fantastic. Well, Graham, thank you so much for your time today. Absolute pleasure. And we wish you all the success going forward.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be invited to speak on your company's broadcast. And should we do this in the future in my own world, I'll be sure to reverse the opportunity for John. And I'd be very grateful. Thank you. It's been wonderful.